Good afternoon. Today, my guest is Andrew Morgan, the director of the film The Long Gone By. Andrew, thank you for being with us. The I'm familiar with you mostly as a documentary filmmaker, and of course, this is a fiction film. So I think the first question audiences, especially filmmakers, may have is how do you approach the making of a fiction film differently than that of a documentary?
I remember there was a friend of mine who was far more successful than me, and I was asking him how I could get a chance to do a scripted film, not just documentary. And he was like, "Just tell them that you've been doing these films without getting a second take on anything, and now you just get to do it again." I approached it really in a very similar way. I think this was there was a lot of stories going around that touched on the subject matter of immigration and deportation, and they all felt very cold to me, and they felt very politicized to me. And I was interested in a story that could spend a lot more time with a character and humanize and soften and paint a different picture. But then, in a lot of ways, the way we made it was like a lot of first time actors, a lot of non actors on location in a small town where we really shot very similar to how you would shoot a documentary. I remember at the time I was really inspired by Chloe Zhao and some of the work she had done early on. And she had kind of worked a lot with non actors and had kind of blurred the lines in a lot of ways between like reality and fiction. And that was really fun. That was a really fulfilling thing that I've done since and I'm still doing. And I love kind of like finding that space almost like in the middle of the two genres in some ways.
I mean, the themes are certainly consistent with the larger body of your work, and you show tremendous empathy and compassion for the characters, and you also let them breathe and be a little different than we might have imagined. So it at least with this film, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't feel like a hybrid to me. I
Mm-mm,
mean, it feels like
mm,
a scripted film, and
mm.
yet it has that authenticity that uh, I see in your documentary films. And I think that's
Mm.
a rare achievement, actually.
I appreciate that very much, and it speaks to the larger team's work too. But it strikes me that like when I watch actors work, even on stuff I'm working on now, I find them fascinating, obviously, but not too different in the fascination from how I feel about a documentary subject. It's like there's a real similarity to like what you're responding to is truth, and you're responding to honesty and like a real human moment. So everything's scripted. You're almost in a way trying to get back to that thing that you have given to you on the documentary side. You just get to kind of create and move the world, which is fun too. So
Tell
yeah,
me
they
about
feed into each other.
tell me about the title, which I don't think I ever asked you. Why is it titled that?
Yeah, it's the title "Long Gone By" comes from a Rex Roth poem that Izzy, the daughter, actually reads to the mom in the film, and it speaks to a sense of longing for something that you're not going to have. And I think the whole film is sort of set up on this idea of I don't want to say it's not a doomed story from the start, but in a sense, that there's going to be incredible sacrifice needed to break a certain barrier generationally in this immigrant story. And I just thought that poem has this sense of sadness and longing that was really evocative of the characters and of the story.
Yeah, you know that you're making the film because something's going to happen, and but I I wasn't sure who was going to have to sacrifice what in order for
Mm,
to come to the conclusion of the story. So I think you balance that quite well. It's not, I mean, often watch a film and even if you really enjoy it, or in my case, even if I really enjoy it, I kind of know what's going to happen. I know, oh, that
mm,
person's going to die or whatever.
mm,
And
mm, mm, mm,
here, you're right. There's a sense of impending sadness,
Mm.
and but it wasn't quite clear who was going to be deprived ultimately.
It's so interesting you say that because I think one of the things I really found exciting when we were making the film was like you were almost like shifting the perspective from the traditional characters. Like we kind of set the film in this small town in northern Indiana, and it's got this very kind of Norman Rockwell surface. And then there's something kind of there's a darkness below that surface. And there's a sense in which even some of the stereotypes of an immigrant, some of the stereotypes of a criminal, some of the stereotypes of certain things we forgive when male characters do them that we don't forgive when female, like all these kind of things. Like it was just kind of fun to play with a lot of those stereotypes and norms. And yeah, I think hopefully create something that kind of like misguides you a little bit as the story's going. That was fun.
Many filmmakers, as I'm sure you know, consider having a theatrical release to be the point of making the movie. Your film
Sure.
premiered on HBO.
Mhm.
Um, how did you feel about that?
I was thrilled. I mean, I have grown up as a kid just like revering HBO. I mean, I think when I still remember I was filming something else in Guatemala when you called me. I'll never forget that phone call when you were like HBO is going to do it, and I was so excited. Um, yeah, I just have so much respect and love for their work, and it was also it ended up coming out right around the pandemic. I can't remember exactly when, but by the time it came to HBO, it was like in that world. And I remember we got a lot of feedback from people who just found it on HBO. And I think that's what's cool, for all that you can say about theatrical. What is cool about a platform like HBO is people discover it who didn't go out to seek it, like it sort of it came to them. And especially for this film and how we made it and why we made it and the sort of thoughtfulness that we wanted it to evoke in someone's mind, that was a really thrilling thing that people could just get this served up as like, an exciting film to see. And maybe it wasn't quite what they expected. I was thrilled by that, and I'm
Well,
still honored by that, frankly.
I mean, I often have the, I mean, when I'm deciding, you know, do I think we're a good fit for a film, I often start with the what are your goals for the film discussion? And if my sense is that the person is going to be bitterly disappointed
Mm,
if it's not all about the theatrical release, oh yeah, and then there are ancillary rights. If that's the attitude, um, I tend not to work on those films because, in my mind, yeah, I mean, a theatrical release can generate
mhm,
reviews that you might not
mhm,
otherwise get, although HBO is a master
mhm,
at publicity. Um, but in truth, most people see films on the small screen. So
yeah.
ultimately, to your point, that's where most people will see any film. And so having that be the launch that gets a lot of attention doesn't seem to me to diminish the film at all. In fact, it seems to lift up the film because it's easy for people to, if they read a review and then it's there and they can see it that minute, that seems to me to create a lot more likelihood that the film will be seen than, oh, I have to get the
Mm,
babysitter and Saturday night and, you know,
mhm,
what
mhm.
time. I mean, it just seems like it works better. So I was thrilled
Well,
with
and
it
it's
for you
and
too.
it's you know it's and you've always done that, and that's why you're so sought out. Is I think you've always understood the constant change too. Like we've done, I remember we did stuff early when early in Netflix days. Like you've always been very much a person that is focused on where is this going and where is the audience. And as much as I love the theatrical thing, and we did festival stuff for this film, and I love seeing it in theaters with audiences, but like I always think too, it's like, is it about me, the filmmaker, or is it about the audience? And if it's about the audience, like if I made it for them, then the question of like, how do we find that audience and how do we get it to them, has always been the fun partnership with you where there's no rules. It's like, how do we get, and when you make something independently, you're just like, you're not Marvel. You're not like you just want people to see it, and however that happens is like sometimes we get overly picky about that part of the process, I think.
Well, that's called being a director, I think. Uh, do you have any questions for me?
Well, when you saw this film, I was kind of shocked that you partnered with us on it in some ways because, it was challenging and it was kind of standing between a couple different genres and it is small. It's there aren't movie stars in this movie. There aren't. So the fact that you were able to help us and champion it means the world to me. But like, was that a challenge? Because I'm thinking about that even now, like as we're making independent stuff, like that feels increasingly difficult to get something that's not got like a name or a marquee
It is.
out there. What
It
what
is.
made you kind of take a swing on this
Well,
one?
I'll tell you my thought process that, I like working with filmmakers I've worked with before, whom I like, and but as much as I like doing that, I'm very wary that if I don't think I can deliver a good result, I don't want to work with that filmmaker because as much as we may have a good relationship, if the film, if I say I think one thing will happen and it doesn't, then, we know what happens to the messenger. And
Yeah.
I think that's the way to ruin a relationship with a filmmaker by taking on something just because you like her, as
Mm,
opposed to because you really believe you can do something for the film. So
mm,
I saw it wanting to like it because I like you, but wary, as you say, it's a small film, it has no stars, but I just found it really emotionally moving.
mm,
And um, the subject matter, I didn't even understand how incredibly timely the subject matter would become in
mm,
2025. But even at the time I saw it, I mean, these were stories that were starting to come to mass attention. And I thought that if not only in this country, around the world. And I thought, well, that's a hook. I mean, that's a
mm.
story. And as you say, we've seen immigration stories that are just so depressing and full of hardship and violence.
Like victim stories, yeah.
Yeah, victim stories. And this wasn't that. This was a human story set in this very particular circumstance. And so I thought it did defy. It was genre bending in that way, that it
Mm.
was a story about immigration and family and different than anything I'd seen. So I thought, I like it. I'm going to go for it. I'm glad you
Well,
trusted me.
I'm glad you did, man. It really it meant a lot to all of us involved, and it's fun. It's fun seeing it still out there and doing its thing, and it is fun how like as time moves on and the cultural context changes, you know, the unfinished work in and around immigration is sadly or surreally or just honestly more pertinent than ever. So
Right. I mean, the stakes are so different this month than they were, 5 months
yeah.
ago, let alone, a few years back when the film was made, that it's urgent, I think.
And I think, if again, whatever the film is not out to make some political point, but I think the insistence and the potential in the film is just to remind us that when we paint with a really broad brush or when we zoom out too wide on any group of people, we can become very cold and detached and arrogant and heartless. And when you zoom in, human beings, when they see another human being, are at their best. And I think, in this time where this is going to continue to play out, we're going to continue to wrestle with the politics of this. Just remembering that these are moms and dads and kids and people with hopes and dreams and fears and lives. That feels like an important part of the equation.
Do you know the work of my friend Rodrigo Garcia? Are you familiar with his work?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
what you're saying really makes me think of his films because so often it, it's the, there are many central characters and each perform a role with one another, but then you go back and you see them at home and the woman who's mopping the floor in the hospital is the matriarch of her family at home dealing with, her obnoxious
Yeah,
son. I mean, everyone's lives when they're in their own element are, flourish with drama and emotion and pain and hope and sadness. And I think that's the thing that if we could remember that everyone has a life, that they're not just, a category of people, um, I think that creates empathy. And I think that's
that's
what you
well
do in
said.
your work.
Very well
So
said.
thank you. Nice seeing you, and please keep making movies.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.